Some shots aren't fired to kill an enemy. They're fired to see what you're willing to lose. Elias Ward still hadn't healed. The old wound under his bandage burned like a coal hidden beneath his coat. Every jolt of the trail stole a little more breath from him, and he refused to let Tom see how much it cost. Tom rode close. Not a boy, not a passenger. A young man who'd learned to read danger in silence, eyes scanning the dust ahead like he was reading the next page before it turned. Then the dust split. 9 riders slid out of the haze and fanned across the road like a net. They didn't need to shout. Their spacing said everything. This was a gang that made roads change direction. Their leader stepped forward, spurs bright, voice calm, eyes landing straight on the dark stain at Elias's ribs. "So the legend's real," he said. "Just not the part where you don't bleed." One of the riders drifted toward Tom, hand reaching for the reins like Tom was already property. Tom didn't draw too early. He waited for the pull, for the moment the man's wrist opened up and the rope in his other hand lifted. Then Tom fired. The shot didn't go for the leader. It punched into the shoulder of the rider behind him, the one raising a lasso. The man screamed and toppled from his saddle, hitting the dirt hard. The gang froze for exactly 1 beat. The leader didn't flinch. He looked down at the wounded man in the dust the way you look at a broken tool. "Useless," he said. He walked over and ended it with a single cold motion, like snuffing a dying ember. No anger, no pity, just disposal. Then he turned back to Tom. "Bold," he said softly. "That makes you valuable." 2 lassos snapped through the air. One caught the neck of Tom's horse. The other cinched around Tom's torso. Tom tried to fire again, but a rifle stock smashed his wrist. His pistol fell into the dust. Tom fought the rope, grit in his teeth, but a rider hooked a boot and dragged him sideways. Tom hit the ground and rolled, hands still bound by the lasso's bite. Elias reached for his gun. The leader pressed a muzzle to Tom's temple, steady as a man signing a receipt. "Shoot," the leader said, "and he dies first." Elias stopped. The road went quiet in the worst way. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own blood moving. They dragged Tom away without hurry, as if they'd rehearsed it. The leader didn't even bother to look back at Elias. He left only the sound of spurs fading into the distance like a funeral bell you can't escape. Elias climbed down, picked Tom's pistol from the dust, and stared at the trail they'd carved. Then he found what mattered. Near the dead rider, half buried in grit, was a smear of red wax. Not random, stamped, a clean crescent bite taken out of it. Elias's chest tightened. He knelt by the corpse, not searching for money, not searching for pride. He searched for paper. Inside the man's inner pocket was a folded note, written in neat, cold strokes. "Payment at Hollow Crown Ridge, bring the apprentice. No noise. The crescent mark is enough. No name. Only a title at the bottom, like a blade laid flat on the page. The holder." Elias stood up slowly, pain dragging at his side. "Hollow Crown Ridge," he murmured. "So that's where you're hiding." He swung into the saddle and followed the tracks. The gang knew how to wipe a trail, but no one erases everything. Elias tracked the heavier prints, the compressed dust, the broken thorn branches, the gravel swept wrong by hooves. Mile after mile, he swallowed the pain and kept his breathing from breaking. Because the moment his breath broke, his focus would break. And then Tom would vanish into the west like so many others. Night thickened. Wind shifted. The dust thinned. Elias found a faint scorch where they'd smothered a fire. A torn piece of rope. A smear of dried blood no bigger than a thumbprint. Tom had fought. Good. Elias didn't let himself feel relief. Relief was a mistake that got men killed. Near midnight, the trail bent into a long stone throat. a narrow canyon that swallowed sound and spat it back twice as loud. The kind of place gangs loved, because it made one man sound like five and 5 men sound like an army. Elias dismounted and led his horse. He listened. Low voices ahead, lantern light muffled under cloth, the smell of old powder, not fresh. They didn't plan to kill Tom quickly. They planned to sell him, trade him, deliver him. Elias's hand closed around the shovel handle. The handle was cold, steady. The weight reminded him who he was, not because of his job, but because of what he'd learned to do with it. He stepped deeper into the canyon. A soft laugh drifted, then vanished. Elias stopped. A trip line stretched low across the path, close to his ankles. A falling trap. A rope meant to yank a man down so the others could swarm. Elias didn't cut it. He scooped a pinch of dry dirt and sprinkled it over the line, watching how it fell. He traced where the line ran, where it anchored. He hooked the shovel under it and tugged just enough to feel the tension. Then he stepped around it and slid into shadow. A lookout leaned behind a rock, bored, rifle loose. The man didn't see Elias until the shovel snapped into his wrist. The rifle dropped. Elias shoved him into the stone, stealing his breath and stealing his lantern. Elias covered the lantern with cloth and moved on. The camp opened ahead, a wider pocket of canyon with 2 supply wagons, several horses tied, crates stacked, and men lounging like they owned time. Tom was there, bound and seated against a wagon wheel, head slightly lowered, but eyes alive. Waiting, not begging. The leader stood near him, flipping a small knife, not to cut, but to make sure Tom heard the sound. "See?" the leader told his men, almost amused. "They say the old Gravedigger never leaves anyone behind. I want to watch him prove it." One of the gang chuckled. "If he comes, we shoot him." The leader shook his head. "No, he's still worth something. Whoever's paying wants the old man to reach Hollow Crown Ridge, wants him to smell the road, wants him to remember it." Elias heard the words and felt cold settle behind his ribs. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't even about robbery. It was a delivery. Elias didn't wait for dawn. He set the lantern down, picked up a small stone, and tossed it across the canyon. It pinged off a tin pot. The sound rang like a bell. A rider turned his head. "What was that?" Another lifted a rifle. The leader raised his hand. "Easy," he said. "He wants us looking the wrong way." Exactly then, Elias moved. He didn't charge like an animal. He moved like a man who'd already counted angles. He swung the shovel into a horse's front leg, not to cripple, to startle. The horse jerked and snapped its tether, crashing through 2 men and turning their rifles into panic. Elias lunged to the wagon wheel, grabbed the rope binding Tom, and yanked hard. Tom toppled sideways into the dust, free of the straight line of fire. Tom rolled once, came up on his feet, and used the loose rope like a weapon, snapping it into the throat of a man rushing him. Gunshots cracked, bullets struck stone, dust exploded. The canyon's echo lied about where every shot came from. Elias didn't stand still to shoot. He used the shovel like a door, angling his body, forcing bad sight lines, forcing the gang to shoot wide or risk hitting their own men. A rider surged with a lasso. Tom ducked and drove a boot into the man's knee. The rider crashed down. Tom snatched the fallen rifle, hands steady, not trembling with newness. The leader stepped toward Elias. He wasn't afraid. He was pleased. "I like you," he said. "You make me feel alive." Elias's voice came out rough. "Then you'll die honest." The leader slashed with the knife. Elias blocked with the shovel handle. The blade bit into wood and stuck for half a heartbeat. Elias twisted, knocked the leader off rhythm, and slammed a heavy strike into the leader's shoulder. The leader staggered but didn't fall, his eyes sharpened with real anger. Behind Elias, a gang member raised a rifle toward Tom. Elias saw it. He turned. He stepped into the shot. The bullet hit where Elias was already weak. Pain burst hot and blinding. Elias's breath tore in half. "Elias!" Tom shouted. Elias didn't drop. Not yet. He fired once, not at a man, but at the wagon wheel. The wheel cracked. The wagon tipped and collapsed sideways, becoming a sudden wall between them and half the gang. Tom dragged Elias behind it. Elias's breathing came in broken pieces. Tom's eyes were wide, but his hands moved. He fired into a lantern. Glass shattered. Flame died. Darkness swallowed half the camp, slowing the gang's push. The leader's voice cut through the canyon. "After them! Don't let them out!" Elias pressed his back to stone, blood soaking cloth. The world tried to dim. He looked at Tom. "This isn't the real fight," Elias rasped. Tom swallowed hard. "I know." Elias shook his head. "No. You need to understand. These riders are padding. The one behind everything is waiting at Hollow Crown Ridge. He wants me there." "He wants you there." Tom's jaw clenched. "Then we don't go." Elias let out a short, painful breath that almost became a laugh. "We're already halfway," he said, "and the road behind us is full of men who want to sell you again." Elias pushed himself upright. Tom stared at him like he was staring at a man who no longer had the right to stand. Elias gripped Tom's shoulder, hard, urgent. "When I fall," Elias said, voice thin, "you don't fall with me." Tom's eyes burned. "Don't say that." Elias didn't argue. He didn't have time. He grabbed a small cloth sack from the fallen wagon. Inside was fine grit used to polish metal. He flung it into the wind. A pale dust cloud bloomed, thin but blinding in the lanternless dark. Elias pulled Tom through a narrow gap along the canyon wall, a slit of stone where a horse couldn't follow. The gang had to dismount to chase. They lost rhythm. They lost speed. Elias and Tom broke free of the canyon and ran into open land where wind could erase tracks and stars could judge without speaking. By dawn, Hollow Crown Ridge rose on the horizon, a jagged strip of black rock against a pale sky, like a broken crown set on the head of the world. At its base stood a compound, warehouses, a yard, a tall building that wasn't a church, wasn't a saloon, wasn't a courthouse. It looked like storage, and storage was where the West hid what it didn't want to answer for. Elias stopped on a low rise, breathing hard. Tom stared at the place. "Elias, you can't—" Elias lifted a hand. "No debate." "He's there," Elias said. Tom's throat tightened. "How do you know?" Elias pulled out the note again and showed the title. The holder. "A man who can order a mayor, a warden, a steward," Elias said. "Doesn't live in a town. He lives where towns send what they want erased. This ridge is a choke point." Tom tightened his grip on the rifle. They moved down toward the compound, low and careful. The guards weren't dressed like deputies. They weren't laughing like outlaws. They were clean, quiet, and disciplined. This wasn't a gang. This was a machine. Elias didn't rush the front. He watched patterns. He listened. A short whistle sounded somewhere inside, not a bell, not music. One sharp signal. Men shifted positions instantly. Elias's eyes narrowed. "He controls them with habits," Elias whispered. "Not with speeches." Tom crawled along stacked crates and saw the marks on the wood. Red wax, crescent bites, shipping stamps. Then he saw one crate lid that sat a fraction wrong, as if it had been opened and forced shut. Tom pressed his palm to it. A faint vibration. A breath. Someone inside. Tom looked at Elias. Elias nodded once. Tom slipped his knife under the seam and pried gently, keeping it silent. The lid opened a crack. A face appeared, pale, eyes wide, lips trembling around a breath that had been stolen and returned too many times. Tom pressed a finger to his lips. The man whispered anyway, barely a sound. "He's upstairs. He never comes down. He only watches." Elias's voice was low. "Who is he?" The man shook his head, terrified. "They call him Holder, but he doesn't hold money. He holds silence." Footsteps approached. Tom eased the lid shut. They pushed the frightened man into shadow behind crates. 2 guards passed, talking like they were discussing weather. "This one must be clean," one said. "Holder wants it finished." "The old man's here," the other replied. Tom's stomach dropped. Finished. Elias's jaw tightened. He turned to Tom, fast and clear. "You don't follow me inside," Elias said. "You follow the crates. Find where they keep people breathing. If I don't come out, you still pull them out." Tom started to protest. Elias didn't allow it. "Go." Tom moved. Elias walked toward the tall building. The front door wasn't locked, not because it was safe, because arrogance doesn't waste keys. Elias stepped inside. The room was clean, dark wood, warm lamps, a map on the wall marked with small crescent bites like the West had been punctured in all the right places. On a desk lay a metal seal, red wax, white paper stacked like ammunition. A man stood with his back turned, writing, black coat, gloves, hair neat. On the desk sat a small box filled with used wax stamps, like teeth pulled from the mouths of towns. The man didn't turn right away. "I knew you'd come," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of voice that came with papers and consequences. Elias stood still. "You're the Holder." The man turned. His face wasn't memorable. That was the point. No scars, no roughness, no sign he'd ever had to fight his own battles. A man who could walk through any town and be forgotten the moment he left. He looked Elias over like a labeled object. "Elias Ward," he said. "The Gravedigger, the legend." He spoke the words like he was reading a tag tied to a carcass. Elias lowered the shovel to the floor, not in surrender, but in truth. Holder's mouth twitched. "You think I fear that shovel?" Elias's eyes didn't blink. "I think you fear what I dig up." Holder lifted a folder and tapped it. "I sent the order to the mayor," he said. "To the chapel warden. To the relief steward. They obeyed. They fell. And you walked exactly where I aimed you." Elias's breath scraped. "Because of Tom." Holder nodded. "Exactly. The young are always the key. The old are only the story." He leaned in slightly, not threatening, just certain. "I don't need your story," Holder said. "I need the one who will live long enough to become useful." Elias's voice came low. "You think Tom will follow you?" Holder smiled, calm. "Everyone follows what keeps them alive. I hold the roots, the debts, the leverage. I hold towns." Elias looked at the map. "Then today, I take something back." Holder tilted his head. "What do you take?" Elias pressed his bloodied palm to his own chest. "My time," he said. "You bought it with my blood. Today I spend it burning your machine." Holder's eyes stayed flat. "I've heard that line from dead men." He raised a hand. 2 men stepped out of shadow, moving like silence wearing boots. Not guards, not townsfolk. Real killers. Holder's voice stayed even. "You don't have to die fast. I want you to see you can't protect him." Elias didn't answer. He moved. Not at the killers. At the desk. He swung the shovel and swept the seal, the wax, the papers to the floor. Wax shattered. Orders scattered. For the first time, Holder's calm broke by half a breath. Elias used that breath. A killer lunged. Elias hooked the shovel under the man's wrist, twisted, and ripped the weapon free. He kicked it away. The second killer slashed in. Elias turned, but his body was slower now. The old wound and the new one argued inside him. Pain flashed. Still, Elias didn't stop. He struck the hanging lamp. Glass burst. Oil spilled. Fire bloomed. The room lit up in wild orange, and the flames didn't just burn wood. They burned paper. They burned control. Holder snapped, sharp now. No! Not because he feared fire, because fire destroyed the thing he held. Elias's voice tore out, rough. "You hold silence," he spat. "I break it." A killer grabbed Elias from behind. Elias hit the floor hard. The world narrowed, but his hand still held the shovel handle. Through smoke, he saw Holder sprinting toward a rear steel door, an exit built for a man who never intended to die in the room where he wrote deaths. Elias rose anyway. One step, then another. Each step was a payment. The killer lunged again, but oil made the floor slick, and fire made the air mean. Elias got to the door. Holder turned and drew a pistol. He fired. The shot hit Elias again, deep, the kind of hit that makes your body go quiet inside. Elias staggered but didn't fall. Holder's voice went cold. "You're only a story. I write stories." Elias's mouth opened around a short, painful breath. "No," he said. "You write papers." He stepped in close, raised the shovel, and slammed it into Holder's wrist. The pistol flew. Holder lunged for it. Elias kicked it away. Holder backed up, eyes finally showing something human. "You can't kill me," Holder said. "Without me, you have nothing to fight." Elias's voice was barely there, but it was still iron. "Without you," Elias said, "they have a choice." Holder rushed, desperate now. Like a man forced for the first time to touch the violence he'd always outsourced. Elias blocked, turned, and shoved him back into the burning desk. Not a speech, not a sermon, just consequence. Holder went down. The crescent seal rolled across the floor, red hot, like a tooth torn out of the west. Elias stood there for a beat. Then his body collected the debt. His knees softened. His hand trembled. The edges of his vision went dark. He turned, trying to find Tom. Outside, Tom was doing what Elias told him. Tom wasn't trying to beat the machine with brute force. He was pulling people out of it. He followed the crate rows, listened for breathing, found a hidden door, and met a guard. Tom fired into the guard's leg, dropping him without killing him, and tore the latch open. Inside were 3 people, bound, eyes wild with disbelief. Tom didn't give them a speech. "Move," he said. "Now!" Then he heard something from the main building. A heavy crack, a beam giving way, smoke rolling. Tom's heart dropped. Elias. Tom ran. He hit the doorway and smoke punched him in the face. Heat bit his skin. His eyes watered instantly. He forced himself inside. He saw Elias near the rear door, slumped against the wall, still upright only because the wall refused to let him fall quickly. Tom grabbed him. "Out," Tom coughed. "Elias, out." Elias's eyes lifted, searching. "Is he—" Elias rasped. Tom swallowed. "He's down." Elias nodded once, like a man who'd been holding his breath for months and finally let it go. Tom dragged Elias out into cold air. They collapsed behind a low stone barrier near the crate yard. Around them, the compound began to unravel. Guards were running, not because someone commanded them, but because command had disappeared. The hired riders who'd been paid to watch the perimeter started backing away. No one wanted to die for a payroll that had just burned. Machines don't collapse because people suddenly grow good. They collapse because the hand on the lever is gone. Tom pressed cloth to Elias's wounds, hands shaking hard now. "Stay," Tom begged. "Stay with me." Elias looked up at the pale sky where morning was thinning the dark. "Tom," he whispered. Tom leaned close. "I'm here." Elias's voice came in shards. "Live." Tom's jaw clenched. "So do you." Elias shook his head once. Not a dramatic shake, a final one. Tom's throat tightened. "Don't!" Elias raised a trembling hand, not to stop Tom from speaking, but to keep him from wasting seconds. "Listen," Elias whispered. "You take what proves he existed. You don't let the West turn this into a rumor. You make it something people can point to, something they can't lie about." Tom nodded hard, tears threatening but not falling yet. "I will," Tom said. Elias exhaled barely. "Good," Tom swallowed. "Where do you want to rest?" Elias stared out past the ridge, beyond the compound, beyond the roads that had tried to swallow them. "A place with wind," he said. "Not near a town, no statue, no speeches, just earth and sky." Tom nodded again. "Okay." Elias's eyes drifted back to Tom. "You're not a gravedigger," he whispered. Tom blinked. "What am I then?" Elias's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "A rider," he said. "A messenger. You get the truth to towns before fear gets there." Tom's voice broke. "I promise." Elias squeezed Tom's hand once. Weak, but real. "Don't make me a saint," Elias murmured. "I was just a man who chose the right moment." Tom lowered his forehead to Elias's hand. "I won't," Tom whispered. Elias breathed out one long, quiet breath, and then he was still. No music, no crowd, just wind and a legend, paying the last price to bury a power that thought it could never be touched. Tom stayed on his knees for a moment, not screaming, not begging the sky for a deal. Then he stood up the way a young man stands when he has just become something older. He did exactly what Elias asked. He searched the ashes and the scattered papers. He took the crescent seal, not to command anyone, but to prove the command had been real. He gathered burned orders, broken stamps, route ledgers, schedules, names, and shipment marks. Not a black book, a map of the network. Then Tom poured the remaining oil over the desk, the stamps, the wax, the symbols that had made towns kneel. He struck a match. He let the fire finish the machine. After that, he returned to Elias. Tom didn't carry him back to a town. He didn't hand him to a cemetery that could be bought. He lifted Elias onto a horse as gently as he could, wrapped him in his coat, and carried the shovel like a piece of the man himself. He rode toward higher ground, toward wind. By noon, Tom found a rise where grass lay low and the sky felt wide enough to forgive. The wind never stopped there. It didn't hold anyone. It simply passed through, as if even grief had to keep moving. Tom dug, not as a job, as a promise. Each shovel of earth was slow, deliberate, quiet. Sweat and dust mixed on his face. The work wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Because every scoop remembered every time Elias had done this for someone else. When the grave was deep enough, Tom laid Elias down, straightened his coat, and placed Elias's hand on the shovel handle, returning what had followed him for so many miles. Then Tom placed something else beside him, a sheet of paper, inked clear, stained at the edge. Bring them both, the holder, so the earth would keep it, so the wind could read it. Tom covered him. He packed the soil firm, and he marked the spot with a flat stone, no name carved, no dates, no title. Just a simple line and a small notch like a shovel, for anyone who would understand without needing words. Tom sat a moment, staring at the stone. Then he spoke one sentence, not to the dead, but to the living part of himself. "I'm going on." He rose. He looked down the road, stretching out like a thin thread across the world. Tom wasn't a drifter anymore. He slid the evidence into his saddlebags. He checked his rifle. He tucked paper and pencil into his coat. He carried the crescent seal, not as authority, but as proof. Tom mounted up. And before he left the windy rise, he looked back once. No long farewell, just a nod. Then he rode out, not as a gravedigger's apprentice, but as something new. A messenger. A rider of truth. The kind of man who reaches the next town before fear does, nails the proof to a post where everyone can see it, and forces the West to read what it tried to bury. And here's the question for you listening right now. If one man could control towns with paper and fear, and that man is gone, what fills the empty space he left behind? Freedom. Or someone new who learned to write orders with a prettier hand.